All right, let's dive straight into this explainer and reverse engineer the absolute discipline behind some of the most valuable products in the world. We're looking at John Mauro's fascinating book, The Thousand Nos, which completely breaks down exactly how one company designed products that defined an entire generation. And honestly, the best part? These aren't hidden secrets. They're totally legible, public choices that any of us can steal for our own work.
So let me ask you a question. Why do we actually love certain products? I mean, do you buy into the comforting story we usually tell ourselves? You know the one. It says that great design requires innate genius, an impossible eye, and a completely endless budget. It's a comforting story, right? Because if the magic is just, well, pure genius, it kind of lets us off the hook. We can just admire it like the weather. But the thing is, we can't copy the weather.
But the reality, according to Mauro's reverse engineering of Apple's history, absolutely destroys that myth of genius. The magic isn't some rare personality trait. It's actually a set of 4 concrete, repeatable moves. They're disciplines. And disciplines have a shape, they can be named, and most importantly, they can be repeated by you and me. So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to dismantle that myth of genius, learn to subtract, make it one thing, design the feeling, make taste the strategy, and finally, steal the questions, so you can apply all of this to your own work.
Okay, move 1. Subtract until it's inevitable.
Let's go all the way back to 1997. Apple was literally about 90 days away from bankruptcy. Steve Jobs returns, walks up to a whiteboard, draws a super simple 2x2 grid. Consumer, professional, desktop, portable, and literally kills almost everything else. That ultimate survival tactic sparked a whole decade of scaling bravery. Think about it. In 1998, they removed the floppy drive from the iMac. That was an unexamined default everyone thought was absolutely necessary. Then in 2001, they tackled the iPod, subtracting all those cluttered buttons and replacing them with a single click wheel. Boom, taking away the misery of scrolling through 1,000 songs. And then, in 2007, the most frightening subtraction of all. The iPhone completely removed the beloved physical keyboard. Why? Because a permanent keyboard was basically a lid on the future. Removing it meant that a single slab of glass could become, well, anything.
So how do you actually apply this? You want to grab Johnny Ive's physical foam block mentality. Inside their design studios, they carved dozens of ugly physical foam models just to see how things actually felt in the hand. Because a digital render flatters you, but an ugly physical object tells the truth. Run a subtraction test on your own work today. List out the sprawl, ask why every single piece exists, and then, and here's the really hard part, cut something you are genuinely afraid to cut. Find your physical keyboard and remove it. It's gonna hurt, for sure, but do it anyway.
Which brings us to move 2, make the whole thing one thing. Great products hide the handoffs. And this brings us to a really vital concept called the seam. The seam is that awkward handoff between hardware and software, or between a sales team and a support team, or design and manufacturing. Bad experiences always happen at the seams, because by default, nobody actually owns the space between departments. Apple famously collapsed the seam between design and manufacturing with the aluminum unibody laptop. Instead of designing parts and handing them off to a factory to assemble, which, creates those annoying creaks and gaps, they literally machined the laptop out of a single solid block. They brought the constraints of the factory all the way upstream into the design room. I want you to think about your own work right now. Whose job is the seam in your process? If your customer passes from your website to your checkout, or from your sales team over to your onboarding team, who owns that gap? Usually the answer is nobody. So, do a seam audit on your own customer experience. Give that orphaned handoff a single dedicated owner. But there's actually another kind of seam. The gap between a brand new technology and the user's familiar world. Think back to early touchscreens. Apple used a skeuomorphic design. Remember that digital bookshelf with literal wood grain textures? It was a borrowed handle. It taught people, hey, this is where your books live. But here is the discipline. You have to tear it down when they outgrow it. By 2013, everybody knew how to use a touchscreen, so Apple aggressively flattened the design and completely removed the wood grain. The training wheels had basically become clutter. You have to be willing to tear down your own successful work when it outlives its purpose. All right, move 3. Design the feeling, not the spec.
We all like to justify our purchases with specifications, but let's be real. We choose based on emotion. A normal company markets with what we call a spec sheet mind. They shout about megapixels and gigabytes. But a feeling-first mind engineers the uncounted invisible details. Apple literally spent engineering hours, perfecting the precise air resistance of the box lids sliding off a new iPhone. Why on earth would they do that? Because the satisfying sigh of that box lid sets the emotional frame for the next 3 years of using that phone. If you feel cared for in the first 10 seconds, in a place no one is officially grading, you instinctively trust the engineering that you can't even see.
Sometimes the absolute most powerful feeling is simply relief. The best feature is often an absence of friction. Think about when Apple released the AirPods. They didn't just add a new feature. They completely subtracted the miserable, rage-inducing, recurring Bluetooth pairing ritual. They took it down to open the case, tap once, and you're done. It removed a pain point so completely that it genuinely felt like magic. That vague, pervasive ease, that's exactly what invisible engineering feels like from the outside.
So how do you actually do this? First, isolate the very first 60 seconds of your customer's experience. What do they feel right out of the gate? Second, stage the room. Think about how the Apple Store is designed. It's this open, generous space with the Genius Bar all the way at the back, proving that they aren't going to abandon you after the sale. Treat your storefront or your onboarding as the product itself. And finally, separate the promise from the proof. Apple initially thought the watch was this luxury status symbol, but customers proved they actually wanted a health guardian. You have to be willing to re-aim your feeling when the customer tells you what they actually need.
Let's move to move 4. Make taste the strategy.
Look, anyone can have good taste once, but turning it into an institution, that is incredibly difficult. When Johnny Ive left in 2019, it introduced a really critical danger called taste debt. This is the slow decay that happens when a team stops exercising active judgment and starts asking, what would the founder do? That's reverence, not taste. To fight this, Apple built a multi-billion-dollar headquarters, that massive glass ring. Why spend billions on details that customers will literally never see? Because it sets an uncompromising baseline for the employees. It tells the team, this is our standard, even when nobody is watching.
But here's the catch. Technique is completely useless without judgment. The M1 chip was a massive triumph because it applied integration to a clearly resolved customer need. We wanted better battery and faster performance. But the recent mixed reality headset, it featured flawless execution and beautiful glass, sure, but it struggled because its fundamental purpose, the why, was unresolved. You can deploy all 4 moves perfectly, but all the beautiful glass in the world won't save a product if you haven't actually figured out why someone needs it.
So what is your takeaway here? Budget for the unbillable. Pick one internal tool or process that no customer will ever see and make it excellent anyway. That waste is the signal to your team of what your true standard is. Write the taste down to convert the genius in your head into a standard your team can actually practice. And always make sure you are picking the right move for the specific problem at hand, rather than just relying on the tool you like best.
And that brings us to the conclusion. Steal the questions.
The absolute biggest mistake you could make right now is simply cargo-culting Apple's minimalist look. Don't steal their frozen answers, steal their questions. Bring it all home with this thought. The genius was never the point. The discipline was always the point. All of these moves, subtraction, integration, designing for feeling, institutionalizing taste, they all share one core philosophy. It's about a maker moving the difficulty onto themselves so the customer gets the ease. It is choosing the expensive, patient path so the people you serve get the effortless result.
So I'm leaving you with this to spark some immediate action in whatever you are building right now. Look at your spreadsheet, your team structure, or your product catalog. What is the beloved thing you are afraid to cut but is secretly a lid on your future? What can you remove today?